Hi, my name is Todd Welty, and I'm going to present here a short video on how to do Intarsia. Let's call it Intarsia 101. This is a basic video showing you step by step how it's done. I get asked this a lot when I show people my work. They say, how did you do that? And I would love to be able to say, hey, look at this video. This shows you everything you need to know. And the video is going to include all the steps and also some tricks and some things to watch out for. This is stuff that I've learned over the last almost 25 years of doing Intarsia off and on, not full time, but I keep coming back to it because I really love it. So that's the purpose of this video. It's going to be a short video, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to make another video, call it Intarsia 201. It would be a more advanced project, and I'm hoping to continue on and do several projects highlighting different techniques that I've developed or that I've learned over the last few years. I'm also going to make one on materials for Intarsia, to tell you a little bit about what the different materials that you can use are and what the advantages and disadvantages and what to watch out for. And who knows what else. I may do other videos that are all related to this. So, but I got to start somewhere, so I'm going to start with the basic, how do you make an Intarsia. So I hope you like it. Check down below for some related resources. I'm linking to other people who, there have been a few, not a lot, but there have been a few that have put together little videos or books and whatnot that you could also refer to. So I hope you like it. Okay, I'm going to start a new Intarsia. I'm going to start a very simple design just to show you how it's done. So I'm going to start with a real simple little piece of opal. I like to have an opal in not every design, but it's my favorite stone, so it's a good place to start. I've got a nice little piece here. I've already even roughed it out into a sort of basic geometric shape. It's not a super high quality opal, but it's decent. It'll look better when it's polished up. So it's good enough. And then I'm gonna start by framing this in onyx in this case. I like to frame sections of stone in the black. It's just kind of my basic go-to color for thin borders around and in between different colored materials. It really works well that way, and it's cheap and easy to work with. So I guess my first task will be to flat the left side and the right side, and then glue sections of this onyx onto the left and right side, and then I'll do the bottom and the top, similar technique, and then I'll just go from there. Okay, so I'm set up to start. I'm going to take this piece here and I'm going to flat the left and the right sides. I'm using a very well-worn 260 grit wheel there, and that, which wheel I'm going to use will depend on what the material is. I know that this is opal, it's fairly soft. I can use this well-worn 260 grit wheel, and it'll remove material fast enough that it'll be fine, and it won't remove it too fast. If this was dinosaur bone or something, I would be using a coarser grit, more aggressive. So that's one of the things you learn as you go along here, is what grit would be the correct one. And if you're wondering, I don't know if you can see, I've got some clamps. You might notice these clamps on my flat lap, and it's just to keep this thing from vibrating. This thing's kind of old. It's been with me for 25 years, and it keeps going, so I want to keep using it. And so I've got this. This is a fence that I added, and you'll see that later. I'm going to use that later. So I've made a few modifications to this thing, but anyway, what works works. Okay, so I'm just going to flat one side, and I'm not going to use the fence right now. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, the way I did it for the first, I don't know, 10 or 15 years that I've been doing this, and it's just by holding it. So you just basically need to orient it so that it's straight up and down, and then grab it like this. Two fingers on each side seems to work well for this, and gently bring it down onto the wheel. Try not to grind your fingernails off, and just let it do its work. Now in this case, Since I'm using a well-worn wheel, it might take a little while to totally flat that surface, and the important thing is to get that surface absolutely completely flat. That's the name of the game when you're doing Intarsia, and I'll show you in a second how to check and make sure it's flat. Alright, let's see if it's flat. The way to see if it's flat is to wet it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this on the camera, but if you have a light, if you angle this thing just right, it'll be like a mirror. And if you wet it, and sometimes you draw your finger across it to make sure that it's wet, and you'll be able to see, you'll see this mirror finish. And if it's not flat, you'll see that as well. Again, I don't know if I can show that here, but that's the test, and you'll find yourself doing this all the time. Every time you take something off the wheel, you want to check it to make sure it's flat. Okay, I'm going to see if I can demonstrate my technique for checking flats on the Intarsia. It's obviously super important that your edges be flat before you glue anything onto them, otherwise you get gaps and it just doesn't work. So this is probably the most important thing in all Intarsia, is getting good consistent flats. So how do you check for flats? The way that has been suggested to me in the past is that you would use a black marker and you would cover the surface, and then you would grind it until all of the ink was gone. That works, but it's actually unnecessary because there's an easier way. And the easier way is if you wet the surface and then you move it around until you can get a reflection. There's your reflection. Sometimes if you draw your finger across it, just to get a thin layer of moisture. Now on this one you can see, I think you can see it, there's two flat surfaces. It's not all one flat surface. There you go, right there. Smoking gun. That's not what you want. What you want is on the other side. This side should be flat. I mean, it's a little hard to film, but that's all one surface, and that's what you want. So strive for this, not for this. Okay, now I'm going to take this piece, which, as I've just showed you, is perfectly flat on this side, but actually not flat on this side, and I'm going to purposely continue on as if they were both flat, and I will glue on some basanite on either side, and then we can smooth it out and see what it looks like when we don't get these things flat. So one side should look much better than the other, and you'll see this gap from this not being flat. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got a couple of pieces of basanite that are approximately the right length. Obviously you want to check first, make sure that these pieces are going to be the right length. These are both a little bit longer than I need, which is okay because basanite's cheap. I mean, it doesn't have to, if you grind off a little bit, it's not going to be the end of the world. But the first thing I'll have to do is flat these. I'm going to switch from this well-worn wheel because just by experience I know I need a little bit more aggressive wheel to make sure these are flat. It'll take forever on this very fine wheel here. This is good for certain things, not good for other things. So I'm going to switch to it's a 180 wheel with a fair amount of wear on it, sort of an in-betweener wheel. This should be aggressive enough, but it won't be too aggressive. I don't want to waste my new 180 wheel on this. I want to save that for things like grinding off the backing off a stone, which can take forever if you don't have a new wheel. So first thing I'm going to do is grind this thing flat. Lately I've taken to using a spray bottle. Instead of like putting water in here every time, I just spray water on as needed, and it actually works. It's kind of surprisingly well. Eventually I'll probably get a system where it's like with a little pump or something, so that when I turn this thing on, the water will automatically come through. But right now I'm just doing it the old-fashioned way, or the kind of stupidly simple way, but it works. It allows me some easy control over how much water I put on it too. So anyway, I'm just going to flat this. I'm going to get it in position, and then I'm going to push down on it somewhat firmly, and then I'm just going to let it grind flat. Not going to move it around too much, maybe a little bit. I just want to get it in position and then push straight down on it with even force. That's the way to get the flat on this. Okay, since this piece was already pretty flat to begin with, I probably don't have to grind that much on it. One thing I like to do is as soon as I lift it up, I flip it over so it's facing up, maybe dry it, and then what I love to do is put like a dot, a little bit of black on it, because if I get interrupted, I can come back and I'll remember which side I flatted. So this side's flat. Now I'm going to do my check thing like I told you. I don't know if I'll be able to get it so that you can see it from that angle, but anyway, I can wet it with my finger, and from here I can see that it's flat. Again, not sure if you can see it. Try one more time. You see, oops. Where am I? Oh, there we are. There, right there. See it? That's flat. Like a mirror, okay? And this side's marked so I can't lose it. I also like to set them, when I set them down, I set them with a flat side facing up customarily, just so it helps me keep track. Where's my other piece? Here's my other piece, same thing. A bit of water, just enough, push down. Sometimes I move it around a little bit to find a spot that's got a little bit more bite to it on the wheel. And then at the end I'll just settle down into one spot. One nice thing about using a wheel with some bite on it, obviously it's faster. The other thing is it leaves a little bit of a rough surface, which is good for gluing. I actually, and normally if I was in lapidary, you would follow this up with finer and finer grit. But I'm not actually going to do that. I'm going to leave it here because the surface is going to be easier to glue onto. So let me again check the flatness. Let's see if I can. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, it's flat. Take my word for it. I'm going to mark it just in case. I won't ever forget which side is flat. And then I will proceed to the gluing. Okay, now comes the gluing part. I've become a bit of a, I don't know if I'd say an expert, but I've definitely used a lot of different kind of glues. For this part, it's normally cyanoacrylic glue, CA glue, because it's faster. Sometimes you'll get into a situation where you need a slower bond. You need to adjust this thing just into perfect position, and you can't screw it up. Then, of course, you'd switch to like an epoxy or something, like hopefully a long cure epoxy, because the short-term ones I believe are not as strong like the 5-minute epoxy. But anyway, I digress. Right now I'll be using CA glue for this. I've used a lot of the Super T, Loctite, 406. Starbond is very popular. This I just threw in there because it says cement. It's actually a gel, a CA gel, which is actually what I'm going to use today. Is this? It's a different kind of a CA gel. The nice thing about it is it gives you a few more seconds to move around and to get it set right before it locks up. And it also doesn't drip and get onto your fingers. I can't tell you how many times I've glued my fingers to things using these thinner glues and some even thinner ones. No bueno. It's definitely embarrassing to have to call your wife down to unglue you from something. So the gels are nice that way. So I'm going to use the gel today. Okay, so for this, I really like to use some kind of a optical aid to just help me look and see very clearly what I'm doing. I keep the glue where it's supposed to go. So I'm going to put this on, and there's my piece. There is my basanite that I'm going to glue onto it. Now, of course, what I really suggest strongly is to double check this before you glue. So take, if I can get this in where you can see it. There we go. Get up real close with your loop and make sure that there's no obvious gaps and that the length is long enough, and figure out where you're going to put it. Are you going to have the basanite up, protruding up a little bit above the stone? Sometimes you want to do that for whatever reason, or you want to make, have it right flush with the stone. Where are you going to put it? You need to rehearse this thing because you're not going to get a second chance. So you need to rehearse this thing. So double check it. Then set this down in a orientation that you know when you pick it up it's the right way. So I'm putting the flat on this side facing me, facing this. I'll set it there. Here's this. Okay, now comes the interesting part. I'm going to glue this puppy. So I hope there's some glue left in this piece. But I'm going to carefully get this so you can see it right there. Don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to just lay some of this out. Lay it out. Make sure it's all the way. Just don't try to skimp on it. Just make sure there's enough. And then now what you can do here. So I want to make sure you can see this. You can brace your fingers together, even a couple fingers, however you want to do it, but just so that so this is a very precision operation here. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to line it up, move it around a little bit, and then push. And I try to push at the top, because you want this thing you want it to seal at the top. This is going to be the top of the stone. You want to make sure that it's, if there's any non-flatness, you'd rather have it be pushing on this side so that the gap is at the back rather than at the front. Okay, and it's already locked on there. There's no going back. Well, I mean, you could throw this in acetone and start over or grind it off or whatever, but anyway, it's pretty much done. I'm gonna stopper up my glue so it doesn't go bad. And that's one side. Okay, that probably wasn't my finest hour as far as gluing this on properly. As you can see, I got it off a little bit. And the reason is I was trying to hold it up so that you, my faithful viewer, could see it and not focusing on what I was doing. But let's just pretend that didn't happen. This will grind off, it'll still look fine, but that's why it looks a little funky. But now I'm going to do the other side. Again, I'm going to try to really hard so that you can see it. And this time, first I'm going to rehearse like I did, like I showed you. I'm going to look at it. Okay. This is not flat. I can see that when I go to rehearse this. Let's see. I don't know if you can see it, but you can feel it. It's not flat. And I did this on purpose. So I'm going to glue this on, and I'm not even going to push on the front like I showed you. I'm not even going to push. I'm just going to push on the back and just sort of purposely try to get that gap there, because I want to show you what the gap looks like. So let me just do that. Get my glue. Where'd my glue go? There's my glue. I'm almost out of glue on this little mini thing here, but anyway, here we go. Okay. Hope you could see that. Okay, I'm going to do this kind of cavalier-like. Okay, I'm pushing on the back, doing the exact opposite of what I told you to do. And for the reason that I told you, I want to show you what the gap looks like. So we'll just let this dry, and I'll grind the face flat, and we'll see if we get a nice icky looking gap there. Okay, so this is actually accelerated this with some CA glue accelerator, which I don't like to use it all the time because I feel like maybe like the bond would be stronger if it just dries at its own rate. But sometimes you just want to dry it out, accelerate the bond. So I did that. So this is the top, this is the bottom. I'm just going to grind away the top on this wheel and see what we get. Normally the two edges are going to be up slightly from the stone, so all the grinding is going to be on these two edges, and then you just kind of check it every once in a while before to see when you get close to the stone. You want to slow down and make sure you don't grind any more of the stone off. So I'm going to do that. If you ever do use this method, make sure and use enough water, because you don't want any of this dust going into the air, into your lungs. It's not worth it. Be safe. almost there. Okay. Now, in order to show you this gap, I don't know if you'll be able to see it from where you are, but it may not have turned out as bad as I said it was going to. Can you see a gap? I may be full of it. Let me see. Let me see. It's there. It's very hard to see. The glue, I'll tell you what. The glue can fill in those gaps sometimes. To some degree, it's clear, and you might not notice it, but you will, depending on what materials you're using. Next to what materials, sometimes it's more visible. If if you had, I don't know, but certain colors that were very contrasty, you might notice that gap more than other times. Anyways, the concept is correct. I may not have illustrated it very well here, but okay, I took this down through 600 and up down to 1200 pre-polish because I wanted to show you that glue line is you can see it. It is visible. So I can get this in focus. Look at the top there. When you polish it, you can see the glue line. Can you see that? Anyway, that's what I was trying to show. I just had to, it doesn't really show up until you polish it. Anyway, there it is. Here's a close-up view. The top is the one that was not flat, with a gap. The bottom boundary was done properly. I'll have to say I did it kind of fast. It's not the perfect boundary between the opal and the basanite. But anyway, I was just trying to make a point. Look how much worse the top is with the gap. There you go. Okay, now now that I've got these two sides on there, I'm going to flat these two sides, and then I can continue on. So I'm back to my partially worn 180 wheel, and let's just do it. I'm gonna hold this with two hands vertically, or you know what, for this one I'm going to put some water in here so I can use two hands. Go, plenty of water. So now I'm going to hold it with two hands. I'm going to make sure it's vertical, and I'm just going to grind it down until these are gone and we get a nice flat surface. Sometimes you can look at it from the top to make sure that it's flat. One thing I've noticed is that when you're grinding down, so when I first started grinding, I'm only grinding on the basanite, right? Because that was sticking out. And then when you get into the opal, you hear the sound of it change. Now, if you've done this a few times, you know when you've gotten into the opal, and then you just go a little bit past that. And as long as you don't move around this way, it should be flat. So actually, now I guess I'll just do the other side. Maybe you see if you can hear the difference. I'm not sure if you could hear that or not. Sometimes it can be kind of subtle, but you'll hear that. You'll also feel it when And you feel it moving down slowly, very slightly. You feel it moving down because you're grinding away, and then when it slows down, it's normally because you're not just grinding on here anymore. You're grinding across the whole thing, and so it grinds, slower. So you can feel that. So just try to attune yourself to the sounds and the sensations as you're going, and you can learn a lot that way. Okay, so now I'm going to glue the other two sides on. I've got two glued on so far. I'm going to do the right and the left side with the same material, same basanite. So I grabbed my little bag of basanite, and I wanted to show you that I have many containers full of materials already sliced up to use for intarsias. One thing I've found useful is if I grab a piece of raw material and maybe make some slices off it, I keep it in a separate bag just because, I may have couple different hunks of basanite that I cut off of, and they're almost similar, but they might be ever so slightly different. So whatever I cut off of one piece, I keep it in a little bag so that I can be assured that they're going to match very closely when I put it on. Okay, so now I get my piece out, and I'm going to check this. I want to make sure that the length is okay and everything before I flatten it and glue it on. So, obviously this is plenty long enough. There's no question there. But if I put it here and then I look at the side, I can see that it's actually the minimum length. This is probably okay, but I wanted to show this because I have this other piece here, which is actually a bit wider. And sometimes it's nice, especially with basanite, which is pretty cheap material, it's sometimes nice to just oversize your piece a little bit. And the reason is that if I made this piece too thin, and at the end of all this, I'm going to grind off the back. I'm going to grind it down, and I'm going to glue this down onto a piece of basanite to finish the Intarsia. And if that means I have to grind off the back here, make it all flat. Oops. And in doing so, I don't want to inadvertently grind off the back of the opal that's in the center. And this has happened a few times where if the opal was kind of thick and I wasn't paying attention, and when I was grinding down the back, I inadvertently ground into the opal. And on some opals, this is white opal, it probably wouldn't be too bad, but if it's if it's a more clear opal that really is depending on the depth of that opal to get the full color, then you would lose some of that color. So you just really want to be paying attention to not only the sides, but the back and how it's all going together, and think ahead. And by the way, when you're cutting off your bits of whatever material, get the lengths you need, you can use like a tile nipper. These work fine. It's actually overkill for this little stuff. Any kind of a wire cutter will do. So you don't have to saw it. You can even break it with your hands. Let's not overthink things. Okay, here's another quick note, because I didn't mention this before. Let's say you've just taken this off the wheel and you've flat out this side. The thing to do would be to dry it. Just make sure it's dry. You don't have to do anything elaborate. When I first started, I used to take rubbing alcohol or some kind of alcohol, and I would clean it off every time, and it was too time consuming, and I never did it after the first few times, and I haven't had a problem. But it should be dry though. If you just took it off the wheel, making sure it's dry. If it's been sitting out for a while and you've handled it, maybe you might want to clean it off. But that's all you really need to do. Just make sure it's not wet, sopping wet, or moist at all. Okay, so I glued the other two strips on there, and I just wanted to show this is what it looks like. This is one of my favorite parts of doing Intarsias when you finish, and this is just a simple one, but when you finish, the top can sometimes look just kind of rough around the edges, literally, and then comes the magical moment when you polish the top and it all flattens out, and then eventually you polish it and it starts to look really beautiful. So in this case, this is a very simple Intarsia, so it's not going to be as big of a thrill, but anyway, so I'm gonna grind the top off. I'm gonna use a very well-worn 260 wheel so I don't introduce any scratches, and then once I get the top, make sure the top's all good, then I'll take this and I'll glue it down onto a piece of basanite and finish this. And of course, you want to make sure this thing is with the glue is completely dried, so it's best to just let it sit for, I don't know, 10-20 minutes or something before you do anything to it. And I'm just going to grind the top. I'm going to rock this thing just a little bit, because as anybody who's in lapidary knows, that a perfectly flat surface is a pain in the butt to polish. So if you just make the surface just slightly curved, just a little bit, it just makes it easier to polish, and it actually, I think, looks a little nicer too. I'm just going to rock it a little bit. Check it. Yeah, needs to go more. Getting there. You can still see it's not quite flat yet. Sometimes I like to go into the very center of the wheel. Sometimes there's some extra bite that, since you haven't been using that part of the wheel for a while, you get a little bit extra. Alright. I think that's pretty flat. Okay, so I've got my piece started here. I've got a nice little piece of opal. I've got some black basanite around it, and it's looking good, if not simple. I could stop there. It would be kind of it would be about the simplest Intarsia you could make, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue on. So first of all, for me, I think this shape wants to go this way, so might as well decide the orientation now. So it looks better like that. I could also go this way. Yeah, it could be. I like the wider part being at the bottom generally, but rules are made to be broken, right? Okay. So now we have some, I've gone through and selected some other materials that, and by no means is this all the possible materials that could be used. But, so which one should I use? You know, you want something that's going to contrast. You don't want something that's dark. For example, here's an example. Here's some lapis. I mean, actually, even that would be okay, because the lapis is such a pure color, but I've actually done this before with the blue and the black, and it actually does work. But just generally speaking, something that contrasts well with the black would be a best choice. But even there's many that I could choose. One other question is a solid color or a pattern. Like this is Veracite, has a nice little pattern. I haven't actually used this in an Intarsia yet, but I'm itching to. But that would be certainly interesting. This is some Amazonite or Amazonite. I still haven't gotten down to the truth of that yet. But anyway, that would really kick right there. Here's some reconstructed turquoise with brass amalgam in it. That's really cool stuff. That would certainly kick. Any of these would do. And one of my favorite activities in Intarsia is sitting and going through all my materials and deciding what goes with what's going to look best with what. Quite enjoyable. Here is some malachite, for example, and I wanted to point out something. I found this in my pile of goodies here, and that you can see this has already been flattened. I did that actually probably about 4 years ago, and I flattened it. I marked it like I always do, and then I didn't use it, and now I can just grab it out of my pile and use it. I don't have to reflatten it again. I know it's flat. So anyway, so which one should I use? I kind of like that. That is, what is that? This is reconstituted gaspiite. That really kicks. And the nicest thing about this is I've got a lot of it. This has also been already flattened. So anyway, I've got a lot of this material. It's very easy to work with. It's beautiful. So I think I'm going to go with this. Although I could change my mind. Okay, so now I'm going to continue on building out on this piece. The process is going to be somewhat similar to what we already did. One thing I wanted to point out, okay, so now I've got a pretty generous amount of this basanite around here to work with. So I could either leave it thick like this, or I could grind it down and have like a thinner layer of black, which I think is what I'm going to do, because I don't want this thing to end up to be too large. That's one of the tricks for me in Intarsia is it's easy for pieces. You keep adding stuff on and then you realize you've got this gigantic piece, and even though you try to make it as thin as possible, it's still on the heavy side. So so for those reasons, I'm going to remove a lot, and I'm going to leave a thinner piece of basanite going all the way around. Another thing is that I could just make this, I could thin this straight down so that it's the same width all the way around. That's certainly one way I could do it. Or I could make it so that maybe the basanite is thicker on the bottom and thinner. There's various ways that I could taper this to give it more sort of, I don't know, dynamic look to it, more, I guess you could say artistic or whatever. But so those are the options. One thing I will note is that just by habit, I will find the thinnest piece and I'll start grinding there. That's an important principle, is that you want to start with the thinner one and grind it, because if you start with the thicker one and you grind it and say you don't grind enough off of it, and then you start building on it, and then you realize that this other one over here was already thinner and you didn't grind this down enough to be similar to this, if that's what you were going for, then you'd be stuck. So if that makes any sense, you start with the thinner one, and then now all the other three have plenty of excess for you to grind and not get into trouble. So that's one of the things I found out pretty early in doing Intarsias. Okay, for these next few steps, I'm going to use this fence that I built. I just made this out of a piece of angle aluminum, beefed it up here a little bit with another piece of aluminum, and I drilled some holes in my flat lap to mount it, and I can swing it out of the way when I'm not using it. I put it into place, and this just helps me keep this piece exactly vertical while I'm grinding, because when I'm holding it by hand and I maybe I'm pushing down on this side a little bit more to try to get to try to change the angle that I'm grinding at, and then at the same time I have to be keeping this perfectly still and perfectly vertical. Sometimes that can be tricky. I just like this fence because it just removes one thing for me to worry about. I don't have to worry about keeping it vertical. I just have to worry about how hard I press and for how long, and which side I press on. So this really is helpful. So I'm just going to use this, and I'm just going to grind off the basanite until the black is, the layer of basanite around the edge is much thinner than it is now. So that's what I'm going to do. It's moving pretty fast. Now I have to grind a little bit more on this side. Grind a little, check a little, grind a little, check a little. And it's getting to be pretty close to the way I want it, and I just want to thin it out a little bit. Alright, that looks pretty good. 1 down, 3 to go. I wanted to add a quick note here about the way that I was holding this Intarsia against the fence. You may have noticed I had the finished side of the Intarsia up against the fence, and I did that because the finished side was perfectly flat. I had ground it perfectly flat, so it kind of made sense, but then I realized that I can't really see what I'm doing when I do it that way, so I proceeded to grind the back flat. That way I can put the back against it and I can see what I'm doing. I mean, like, duh, okay, right? But I just wanted to make that clear. This is the way you want to do it. The thing you just have to make sure is that the back is flat. It's not flat now because I added this other strip here, but when I was grinding on it, this back had been flattened. So again, flat the back, put it on the fence this way so you can see what you're doing, and you're good to go. Okay, I'm going to see if I can't get this gluing process on video here, so bear with me for a second while I get this situated. I've got my piece here, and I've got this piece of gaspiite that I'm going to glue on there. I've got it marked. The flat side is marked, so I'm ready to go. I'm going to lay out some glue. I've cleaned off the surfaces, dried them off, lay it out, get it in position, and this piece is longer than I need. Actually, you know what? This is the piece that I had meant to use. Thank you very much. There it is. I better not wait too long. Better get it in position. Brace my fingers, get it set, and just push it right on there. Push on the top, firmly. Don't worry if this piece is up slightly above the level of your main piece. That's probably just about how you want to do it, because you'll grind it off, and it'll be just fine. I've got plenty of depth here to work with, so this is perfect. Okay, I'm going to see if I can't get this get video of gluing this piece on and get it a little bit closer to the camera, but still in focus. So this will be the last piece of gaspiite I'm putting on here, and I've cleaned off the surfaces. Everything is laid out and ready to go. So I'm just going to lay out some glue here. Getting low on glue on this last little tube here, but there we go. Okay. And my piece is ready to go. I laid it out here. It's been marked as flat, so I'm good. I'm going to brace my fingers together, get it ready, and bam, push. That's done. Ready to flatten the top again and continue. Okay, so I've got all 4 sides done with the gaspiite. I did make the black border just a teeny bit wider at the bottom. One thing I'll point out is that it's slightly easier to do that than to actually make it straight, so, and it looks better, so it's a win-win. So anyway, and I've got the gaspiite all the way around the outside. I just need to flatten this, and then I'll continue around again on the outside, and I think I'll just do a basenite again on the outside. So the very outside of the Intarsia would be all basenite. I'm going to use pretty much exactly the same techniques I've been using so far to do that, so I'm not going to show all the parts, but yeah, that's the next steps. Okay, so I've got the left and right sides flattened. I wanted to stress again to make sure that, like, when I flatten these left and right sides, I want to make sure that this is narrower, has less material than the 2 unfinished sides, or at least to keep an eye on that, because what can, you know, sometimes these strips are of unequal length when you grab them out of your drawer of strips. Maybe these ones were not as thick as this one, and you're not paying attention. You grind these down, you glue on your strips, and then you look at these and realize that this one is too narrow. And you can always take material off, but you can't add material. So you have to really keep an eye on that the whole way through. And one other quick point here, since what I'm about to add is the outer strip for the Intarsia. I want to make sure that the piece I'm using is tall enough, basically, so that I have plenty of extra height around the outside, because I'm going to be gluing this down to a backing piece, and I just want to have plenty of height around the outside to get it to seal all the way around. You know, for the inner strips, sometimes they can be small, and it doesn't matter because they'll get filled in with epoxy when we do our backing, but for the outer one, we just got to double check and make sure that it's tall enough. Okay, this is my favorite part. One of my favorite parts doing Intarsia is seeing what it looks like when you smooth down the face. You've added everything you're going to add, and it looks kind of messed up sometimes. But then you smooth the top, smooth it, and then when you take it off and you look at it really for the first time, it's really a beautiful thing. And grind a little more. Okay, this isn't finished yet, but let's see. Oh, well, no. It's looking good, but actually, it's still not. No, it's not there. Not quite there yet. It's almost there. It's starting to look good. Let's grind a little more. Kind of concentrate on the edges a little bit. I'm on my well-worn 260 grit wheel. I don't want to put any scratches in, I just want to smooth it down. Looking pretty good. I gotta obviously finish the outside, but you can see that this is gonna polish up real nice. It looks, there's no polish on it right now, of course, so it doesn't look, you know, it's not finished, but it will look good. And you can see that the edges look pretty good, except that one edge that I purposely messed up is, if you look really close, you'll see a little bit more glue than you should, but other than that, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's a nice, it's going to be a beaut when it polishes up. Okay, this is my favorite part. One of my favorite parts doing Intarsia is seeing what it looks like when you smooth down the face. You've added everything you're going to add, and it looks kind of messed up sometimes. But then you smooth the top, smooth it, and then when you take it off and you look at it really for the first time, it's really a beautiful thing. And grind a little more. Okay, this isn't finished yet, but let's see. Oh, well, no, it's looking good, but actually, it's still not. No, it's not there. Not quite there yet. It's almost there. It's starting to look good. Let's grind a little more. I'm trying to concentrate on the edges a little bit. I'm on my well-worn 260 grit wheel. I don't want to put any scratches in, I just want to smooth it down. Looking pretty good. I gotta obviously finish the outside, but you can see that this is going to polish up real nice. It looks, there's no polish on it right now, of course, so it doesn't look, it's not finished, but it will look good. And you can see that the edges look pretty good, except that one edge that I purposely messed up is, if you look really close, you'll see a little bit more glue than you should, but other than that, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's going to be a beaut when it polishes up. Okay, I should be ready to go now. I've selected my piece of basenite for the backing. As I showed you before, it's fairly as thin as I could get it. I have a whole box full of these already sliced and ready to go. I cleaned this off with alcohol to make sure that it's absolutely clean. I cleaned the back of my Intarsia with alcohol again. I made sure that the back of this opal is blacked, fully blacked, even though it may not be necessary in this case. And I'm ready to go. I have my glue ready to go, and I'm just going to put some on there. This is 30-minute epoxy. So I'm going to lay some on. It doesn't take very much, but I am going to make sure that it's spread all around here, covering the entire Intarsia, back of the Intarsia. Okay. I've already worked out where I'm going to put this so that I can maximize or minimize the usage of this backing. I'm going to just nudge this right up in the corner here. I'm just going to lay it there, and then make sure there's no glue on my fingers, because I've done this before where I accidentally got glue on the front of the Intarsia. But I'm just going to move this around. I also checked this for flatness by laying this on here previously, like how I said I always like to rehearse everything. I laid this down on the backing before I even mixed up the glue and made sure that it was absolutely flat. It wasn't wobbling around or anything. So now I'm just going to move this around and push out the glue a little bit. You should see glue all the way around the outside by the time you're done. Let's move it around. Make sure I'm not into this. There's a little white area on the edge of the basenite. I want to make sure I don't wander into that. But yep. There we go. And I'm just going to push down on it just to make sure. Sometimes I might put like a little weight on it, but I really don't think it's necessary. It's going to be fine. It just needs to sit for a while. So there you go. And when I'm done, I'll take it to the trim saw and I'll trim off all this. I'll basically cut this out from this piece of basanite, and then I can finish it. Okay, I wanted to show what this looks like. I put like a pretty high pre-polish on it. I didn't put the final polish on, but you know, this is just, it's up to you how far you want to go with this thing, but I really wanted to show an unvarnished look at what I did here and the sort of things to look for. This was not by any means one of my best finished products here, and part of the reason is I've been away for a while from lapidary for like 4 years, so I'm getting my legs back, my lapidary legs back, and the secondly is I spent, I think, more time worrying about getting good video of this than actually doing it, so that's my excuse. Anyway, as far as to what to look for, one thing I noticed is you can see this lines here. So look up here, there's no line. Well, you can barely see a line there, even if, yeah, you can see a line, but it's not very visible. Over here, it's almost invisible. That would be the target. That would be the ultimate. Down here you see it, and also down here you see it, and these little black marks. I'm not sure what those are. I think possibly the ink that I used to mark these gaspiite pieces as flat. Maybe it leached in a little bit because it may be a little bit porous, or maybe I ground down from the top and got into one of those dots. So when you put those dots on, make sure you put them on far enough away from the surface that will be showing, that nothing will show. And particularly with certain stones like ivoryite, for example, is one that I've had problems with before because it's just so porous. But anyway, those are the things to look for, are those little lines. You should also be able to see, I think it was this side. Let's see, was it this side or this side? I think it's hard to even tell. One of these sides I intentionally put a glue gap, and I think you can see it here. But the glue polish, so it's not that horribly visible. But I guess what I wanted to emphasize is that for example, when you look at somebody else's work and you want to know how good they are, look for these lines that you know are there, and are they visible or not. Like here, again, this is really good. This is what you want. If you see a piece of Intarsia where there's basically no lines visible, that means they know what they're doing. Again, I can show you one of my better pieces and you won't see any lines on it, but it's actually good that I ended up with some lines here so that I can show you what not to do. And yeah, the other thing is on the back, it's up to you how high polished this is. I really need to polish this more, but I just wanted to show, that you should sign the back, definitely. So it's a piece of work, and you put hours of work into this, you should definitely sign the back. I'm going to polish this down a little bit more and sign it again, but anyway, you get the picture. You can also see, you can see how thin I made the back. This is the back layer. See how thin that is? I really ground it down because I want the whole thing to be thin. So this is what I've done. This is definitely enough to put a bezel around it, but no more. So there you go. Okay, here is a much better piece of mine that's actually fully complete and might serve as a better example of how to do this. So for example, if you look at this border between two lapis sections, I mean, you can see a line there, but you can only really see it when you have a reflection around it. Otherwise, it's pretty much invisible. Same with that one. I mean, it's better. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's pretty good. So if you can get it that good, then I think you're there. And as for the back, yes, I did sign this. I don't really like fully polish the back, because I can do that if I want to, but normally I don't really bother. It's also, yeah, anyways. Okay, so here we go. This looks kind of like almost like a preform for all you lapidaries out there. This is to a point now where you could almost think of it as a preform. You could finish this in using any lapidary techniques you normally would use. Now, some people, for some reason, it's fairly common with Intarsia that it will be finished with sort of a facet around the edge, and I'm not sure where that started, but it looks cool. That's one way of doing it. Another way would just be to round it like you would any cab. Don't round it too much, and if you do round it, be careful if you start grinding into here, because unless your pieces are very deep, your pattern could change a little bit. If you grind down on it, just try to keep it flat so that you finish with exactly what you started with. But you could round the edges a little bit. I like to round the edges a little, or sometimes I'll just leave it kind of sharp and not perfectly sharp. You have to take, I think you wouldn't leave a very sharp edge, but just almost completely sharp, because it looks cool as well. But that's totally up to you. Now, as far as the thickness, I had it down to about 2.7 millimeters before I glued the back on. Now it's up to about 7 probably. So of course this is too thick, and it doesn't need to be that thick. The backing only needs to be, I don't know, 1.5 millimeters or something, because this material is basanite, it's pretty strong. So it doesn't really need to be that thick, and it just adds weight to the piece, which is exactly what you don't want. So you just need to grind the back down using your 180 disc. Maybe chamfer the edges a little bit, so that just as you would any kind of a cab. And then don't forget to sign the back if you want. I mean, it's up to you, but I like to always sign mine. You put a lot of time into this. Why not put your initials on it for posterity? And then after that, you can sell it, put it in jewelry if that's your thing, put it on a display case, or give it to somebody, or just hoard it, the treasure it is. Thanks.